Hi everyone, it's Rachel, and in this video I'll be showing you what we received in the Harry Potter Wax Seal Craft Box by Sophie and Toffee, as well as showing you how to make some projects using the supplies included. So in this Harry Potter box we received some wax seal silicone molds, so here we have the designs as well as the actual handle. There's some Harry Potter open bezel charms, 2 colours of pigment dye, epoxy resin, cross-stitch thread, Harry Potter resin design film, epoxy resin, chunky glitter, magnets and stitching needles, wax sticks, and finally a bunch of cross-stitch molds that look like this close up, and also the booklet comes with a bunch of different design suggestions as well. So to begin, I'm going to be making the Harry Potter wax seals. So here I'm just pouring some UV resin and a small amount of black pigment dye into a silicone cup, and I'm just mixing that around with my toothpick until it's even in colour. I then also took some black holographic glitter, and I'm also mixing in a small amount of this as well. I didn't want to add too much though, because this is UV resin that I'm using here, and if you do make it too opaque it won't cure properly. So then I took some of the wax seal silicone molds that came in the box, and I'm going to be pouring my resin into these. The box actually came with 6 designs, but I'm only going to be making 4 in this video. So I filled each section of the mold up about halfway, and then I'm just curing this under my UV light. You then want to take the magnets that came in the box. Now these magnets are very strong, and when you're placing them in the mold you do want to make sure that you remember which way you put them so that the polarity is going the right way, and that way when you put the magnet in the handle later on they actually attract each other. You can see here, even as I just popped them into the mold, that they were kind of pushing each other away, so I did have to separate my molds a little bit on my work surface. So I covered each magnet with the remaining UV resin, and then I just popped it out of the mold once it was cured, and I just repeated this process with the other 2 designs as well. I could only do 2 designs at a time because you only want to put 1 magnet in each mold just due to the strength. I didn't show it on camera, but I did cure this top layer of UV resin under my UV light as well. So when you pop them out of the mold, if there is any excess resin around the sides, you can just go ahead and file this away. So now that the wax seal parts are done, we are now moving on to making the handle. So for this part I'm using epoxy resin, and I'm using the 2 colours of pigment dye that came in the box, and I did also take some metallic copper pigment as well because I'm going to try and make my handle look like it is wooden. So here I'm just mixing my epoxy resin into a silicone cup along with all my pigments that I've poured in, and again I'm just mixing this really well until all the colours are spread out evenly throughout the mixture. Then here I have the handle silicone mold, and I'm just standing it up straight and I'm pouring my resin mixture straight into it. Because the resin that I am using for this part is epoxy resin, I needed to let it sit and cure overnight for 24 hours. Once it has cured, and it was the next day, I then went ahead and I put a little bit of UV resin at the top, and then I just popped in my magnet, and like I mentioned before, I had to make sure that it was facing the right way so that the polarity was correct. I then used a little bit more resin to cover this up, and then I'm just using my UV light to cure the resin and hold the magnet in place. Here I'm trying to remove it out of the mold. Now this was a little bit of a struggle, but I did eventually get there, and then this is what it looks like in the end, and I'm really happy with how it looks. Here you can also see what it looks like when you attach the designs, and the magnets are really strong so they connect really well. Once everything's been made, we're then ready to melt our wax to actually make some seals. This is the first time I've ever done this, so it was a little bit of an experimental run. I ended up lighting my candle and just waiting for the wax to dry, and I did this on a sheet of baking paper to start off with as a little trial run. Once I felt like I had enough melted wax, I then pushed in the wax seal, and I found that it wasn't enough and it was quite thin. So in the end I made another one, and this time I'm actually doing it straight on my work surface, and I'm trying to make it a little bit thicker. Again, I'm pushing in my wax seal design, but this time I didn't actually push it in hard enough, so the design didn't show up as well as I would have liked. So for some reason, after 2 failed attempts, I felt it was time to have a go at the real thing. I don't exactly know why. I guess I was feeling confident at the time or something. So here I have prepared an envelope and I've got some little flowers, as you can see, and I'm just melting over the blue wax this time to seal the flowers in and the envelope together. I pretty much just pressed on my wax seal design and I hoped for the best, and when I pulled it up you can see that the handle actually came away, so then I had to pull up the actual design itself, but surprisingly it did turn out quite well this time. I feel like I could have probably used a little bit more melted wax because it did kind of mess up a little bit on the design on the top side section, but other than that it did actually seal in the flowers and the envelope together, which I guess is the main purpose. I thought it was a lot of fun to try out this different craft, and of course my favorite part would actually have to be the wooden handle. So as a little bit of a bonus kind of part in this video, I thought I would try making one of the cross stitch molds. So here I have the jumper silicone mold and I'm pouring in my UV resin, and then I'm using my toothpick to spread the resin out to the sides. I tried to get all the resin down into the little crevices so that it would work properly, and then as you saw with the paddle pop stick, I then scraped away any excess resin, and this is so that none of the little pegs were covered. After curing the UV resin under my UV light, this is what it looks like. I did have a little bit of excess, which I'm literally just pulling away with my fingers because it was really thin and easy to do. There were also a few pegs that did end up getting covered with some resin, so to fix that I'm just popping them out using my needle tool. This is the design that I'm going to attempt to make. So it's the Gryffindor Jumper. So I took my threading needle and the yellow thread, and I'm just going to begin by making the lion in the center of the design. So I've tied a knot in the end of my thread, and then here you can see I've already started off camera because I kind of had to get used to it. Just like with the wax seal, this is actually my first time cross stitching. So I believe what I'm doing is called a back stitch, where I'm kind of pushing my needle where I want it to go, and then I'm going back to the previous hole to create my design. The first little part I did kind of looks a bit messy, but then I got the hang of it and I was really trying to make sure that I put all the stitches going in the same direction so that they would look nice and neat. Once I had done all of the yellow part of the design, I then moved on to the red thread, and I pretty much did the exact same thing. I just followed the pattern in the booklet and I tried to make my stitching as neat as possible. I kind of wish I made the actual jumper part an opaque color, and that way you wouldn't see the stitches and the design or the messy part going on in the back of the jumper. I was actually going to do a black background with the thread, but I felt like I didn't have enough, so I didn't even begin. If I do go and buy some more black thread, I feel like I would definitely want to finish off this project though. So here is what it does currently look like with no background. It's definitely not the neatest cross stitching that I've ever seen, but it was my very first go and I got more and more practice and I kind of seemed to get the hang of it. So I guess that is everything for this video. If you enjoyed, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel for lots more crafty videos, and I will see you next time. Bye guys!